Hey, Dr. Nika here. I am so excited to have with me Amy Hinojosa, who is the CEO and president of MANA. MANA is the largest organization for Latino women in the United States, and it's a fundamentally amazing organization that does a lot of great work for the community. And so we are thrilled to have her here with us to talk about, how to survive COVID as a Latino in this country with all the stressors that exist. And so thank you so much, Amy, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, so we're going to go right into it. So my first question for you, as somebody who works in the community, so oftentimes, and maybe you've seen this as well, that the community is often presented as a monolith, right? We sort of think of them as one and the same, but we miss the fact that there are varied subgroups within that group, and they all need very different things, right? The college student who's a second generation, family has very different needs than a person who's an undocumented farm worker, out in California somewhere. So for you, as you think about COVID-19 and the way that it is impacting the Latino community, what are some of your biggest concerns and challenges that you feel are coming up for you regarding particular subgroups?
Right. So I think that you're absolutely right. The Latino community is not a monolith. Everything from first generation immigrants, new immigrants, to like myself, third generation born in the United States in my family, right? And so our varying ways of being and perspectives are, you can't account for those things when you're looking at trying to help a community writ large. But I think that when you start to think, we've had a lot of conversations about who essential employees are and who essential workers are in this time. So I think a lot about the DACA recipients who are now working in the medical field, who work in police and law enforcement fields, who aren't even sure that their status is going to remain because we have a pending Supreme Court case and they aren't sure if they're going to be able to stay in this country, but at the same time are on the front lines of protecting and serving all of our communities as we weather this storm. I think about the farm workers who, if you are lucky enough to be home and trying to infuse fresh fruits and vegetables into your daily diet, there is an immigrant who is working in the fields who doesn't have protective gear, who may not have food and shelter enough for themselves, who are making sure that you continue to be fed. I'm thinking about people who work in the restaurant industry, who are probably overworked, underpaid, no access to health care, who maybe get paid in cash. And in this moment, they are essential workers, but all that could go by the wayside the moment that they get sick. And there are no resources for those folks. And so I want us to think, as we talk about essential workers, we need to keep that in mind moving forward. If they're essential to keeping us alive and safe and moving forward in our time of biggest crisis, how do we then treat them moving forward?
Absolutely.
And I think that and just like any other group, I think we're all worried about our jobs and our financial situations. If Latinas in particular only make 53 cents on the dollar for what a white man is earning, we're already trying to make ends meet and rob Peter to pay Paul. And so then when your income is completely cut and you're waiting on your stimulus check, and that may be the only money you've got coming in the foreseeable future, folks are in really desperate situations right now that we really need to take into consideration. I think the list goes on and on, because the conversation about immigrants and the Latino community has become so polarized. And so we automatically, or the media has automatically put us in this place when we think of immigrants or immigrant families, we're thinking already the worst things. But, if there's a shining light to it, it's that we're shining light on the fact that these are folks who are essential to our country and to our economy and to keeping us safe.
Absolutely. I really love that reframe, because I think you're so right with the way that it's used as this political football to score points on either side can be frustrating when you realize that these are A, real people, and
Right.
B, in times of crises, we are leaning on this very community that we've denigrated in so many ways to keep us going. And without their contribution, how much more destitute our situation would be, right, as a country writ large.
No doubt, no doubt, because you can think of worst case scenario if there had been mass deportations or more folks had been rounded up by ICE. How would we be getting our food and our deliveries and the things that we need to stay safe in our homes right now? And so
Absolutely.
this situation would look so much more detrimental for so many more people.
Absolutely. Very, very true. Kind of going along that theme, when in your leadership and in your work with Mana, so much of your initiatives I find are often centered around things like health and education, financial well-being, all things that are heavily intersected and impacted by COVID in very, very direct ways. For you, as you think about, again, the challenges that Latinas are facing across the country, what are some of your biggest concerns for them in light of that?
So I think that, we talked about some of the financial concerns being among the largest. I think as we're going through this crisis and we're learning more about the disease, we're finding that it's hitting our Black and Brown communities the hardest. Yeah. And it's because we live in poor places and have higher instances of diabetes and heart disease. And these underlying conditions are the ones that are the higher rates of asthma, depending on what parts of the country you're in. And I think that we're seeing all of this come to bear as it makes for a far more dangerous situation if someone contracts a disease and is in these minority groups. And so, everything goes by the wayside once you get sick, right? And your only priority is survival. And, so we're putting folks in the most desperate of situations when we've got them out working and they don't have even the healthcare to back them up should they get sick. And so I think that there's a domino effect that's going to happen, not just to Black and Brown communities, but anyone who's impacted by COVID, who it might be financially insecure, who might not have health insurance, who might not have a support system that could help them even if they got sick, to make sure that they had something to eat while they were sick in bed and couldn't take care of themselves. And so I worry for caregivers in particular. Our families tend to, in many cases, be multi-generational in the home. So if you are a Latina who's got an elderly parent in the home and young children that you also have to take care of, and how you separate out, right? You're in limited space. So how do you care for the elderly in your home and make sure that because they are vulnerable, they're not getting sick? And then try to keep up with all of your day-to-day. So, the average Latina who is a caregiver is in her 40s, has a parent as well, or an older relative, as well as children in the home. And so you can see that impacting a lot of people. And, numbers are what always speak to me, right? So if 1 in 5 women in the country right now are Latinas, that means 1 out of every 5 women, has at least one, if not a multitude of these concerns. And the weight that puts on people's shoulders as they're trying to manage and try to keep a brave face and try to hold it together for their families, the enormous weight of all of those things is weighing heavily.
Absolutely. And just even as you were saying that, what came to mind was, if you're sharing space, and often very limited space with so many people, right, even if you were to get sick, how do you even socially isolate, right? How do you even create that space to quarantine yourself? Or do you even have the luxury of not going into work? If you don't work, will the rest of the family okay? Or do they need your contribution to make ends meet overall? So there's so many factors that are brought into the conversation when you really think about how deep this goes.
Right. And I think, just to put a picture on it for people who are trying to think how this works in real time, there's a television show, One Day at a Time. And I think everyone's probably familiar with the one from the 70s. There's a new iteration of it that centers around a Latina family. The mother is a nurse practitioner, so she would be a person who's on the front lines. The grandmother lives in the house, and the 2 high school age children right, who live in like a 2-bedroom apartment, right? So if under those circumstances, even though they may have insurance and resources, if the mother gets sick because she's on the front lines, there are a lot of things that happen to that family as a result of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And so very little safety nets or backups, sort of like, or reinforcements, I should say, that will come in if that mom is compromised in any way. You know?
Right. So let alone if that mom's a food service worker.
Right.
And either she gets sick or the business has to close down because they don't have enough business due to the situation, right? And so so you can see how desperate it quickly gets for people. And then, you know, if you add the undocumented piece to it, you know, then because then you don't have access to resources like unemployment or, you know, Medicaid or, you know, any kind of social safety net.
Right. Or even the stimulus checks that are coming out, they're not going to get any of that, right?
Exactly.
So even if it would tide another family over, the option of having that support isn't even on the table for many families.
Right.
Yeah. I know in your work in advocacy, you've also done a lot around getting people to complete this 2020 census, right?
Yes.
And as you know intuitively, and I'm sure many watching know, the census data is really what is used to decide where resources go, to which communities, and how their needs are interpreted and how they're met in many ways. And for you, you know, that certainly then brings, I think, ties back to what we've been talking about, which is the social needs that are very present for many people, again, within the Latino community. As you think about social policies that perhaps need to be implemented or altered or eliminated even in light of COVID, because I think if any good thing has come out of COVID, it's that it's underscored some of the social inequities that exist in our country and the ways in which it's harming all of us, right? And with the census, I think we do have an opportunity to really allocate resources in a way that helps us to meet some of those needs that are present in respective communities. But for you, when you think about social policies, are there any that you would want to see eliminated, implemented, or altered in any way, particularly in light of the impact that COVID is having?
Absolutely. There's so many things that come to mind. And, you know, the census really represents an opportunity for a snapshot to be taken of a community. And I think this is such an interesting time, you know, as a social scientist for it to be taken, because we're going to have to rethink how we interact, how we look at each other, how our communities are configured from here on out. If we're talking about a long-term social distancing type of situation, but like I was saying too, how we view other people in our community that we previously would have referred to as low-skilled or illegal or, you know, any derogatory terms, and how they really are the backbone of our communities and how they are on the front lines of keeping us safe. And I think that social policy will have to catch up to that, right? And so if that means immigration reform, that's what it should mean. And this should be, you know, the empirical evidence of, you know, as Mr. Rogers used to say, look for the helpers. Who are the helpers, right? And we can see our communities really being helped by the Latino community in this time. I think that the African-American community as well, right? We're all in the same boat and worried about the same things. And so I think there's going to have to be a shift in how we view our communities of color, how we view people in jobs that are far underpaid and far undervalued. But I also think it represents this opportunity to elect the representation that looks like us and that will serve our communities in the appropriate way. Because I think we've seen this, you know, the nicest way I can put it is a disappointing federal response and slow response from our federal government. And I think that all the difference in the world happens when you elect people who are connected and engaged with the communities that they aim to serve and who look like them and understand what the situation is and will act accordingly. And so that opportunity for representation, filling out the census is the first step, right? But then creating that next level of opportunity to put the representation in place that's going to serve us, in our times of need, just as our communities are serving the larger community in all of our times of need.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the things you're highlighting there is something that I just fundamentally believe, that when we value things, we treat them differently. And if we, as a society, don't equally value all people, then we can see how these inequities are maintained. But with COVID, again, we're seeing how so many people that are typically disregarded are actually showing themselves to be quite valuable to us. And therefore, as you said, social policy needs to rise up to meet that.
Right. And to value them in the way that they should, because I would be remiss if at this, I didn't think about taking care of our teachers too,
Right.
and how valuable our teachers are, not only to our children, but to us, right? As we rely on them on this heavy lift of teaching our children, and we realize how undervalued, underpaid they really are. When we're trying to do all those things at home by ourselves.
Right, exactly. And there have been countless memes and gifs of people who are caretakers and parents really just lamenting about how difficult it is to teach their children, their own children, with one or two in their classrooms that they are overwhelmed by. So how much more important do we see teachers who are managing 20, 30 plus kids at the same time every single day?
Right. And in that vein, we should also mention the inequity of not having access to broadband, not having access to the internet, and how that's so much more detrimental to our kids in neighborhoods who don't have access or don't have families who can afford that. We've been working a lot with different corporations, whether it's Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, who are really putting their money where their mouth is and making sure that they're doing everything they can in their footprints to reach out to these families. But it's not enough. Policy-wise, there has to be a large-scale broadband initiative to make sure that in this day and age, everyone is connected, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's not just for the purposes of education, but it's also to get the information and resources that we need to keep up with the developments of something like the COVID disease and the spread, right?
Absolutely. And to maintain community, because that's become our only way now of being able to connect with the people that we love and care about, which is through these virtual meetings. And if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, then God help us all, right?
Exactly.
As you think about, ways that people can become more socially involved, you just mentioned being mindful of who you vote for, knowing who the candidates are and who your leadership is in the government, and seeing that they not only reflect your values, but are also people who look like you, or at least are sensitive to the needs of the people who look like you, right? They don't have to be your twin for them to care, but they can be involved and knowledgeable of the things that affect your community, and therefore be a good representative of you in government. In light of that, is there a book, is there a website, is there a resource that you would recommend for people who want to become more socially involved at this time?
That's such a good question, because there are so many resources, and I think it depends on what you want to be and how you want to interact. And I think that anything that you try to read, there's so much to be gained from reaching out to another person and asking about their experience. It doesn't have to be a book that you have to buy. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It really is just making a commitment to yourself to be more knowledgeable, whether it's on an issue that concerns you. Maybe climate change is all of a sudden really important to you because you're like, look at how all the cities have reduced their smog to zero in light of this disease, right? And what does that mean for the planet? And so I think there are a multitude of ways that you can just get out there and make yourself knowledgeable on something. And you can do that with a Google search, right? And you can do that by educating yourself on any topic. And I think as we're trying to figure out how to declutter and take all the noise out of our lives and exist in this new reality, now's the time to start thinking about, all right, what are the things that are important to me? What do I really want to know about? And how do I want to engage there, right? Because advocacy is going to start happening online by a factor of 1,000, right? It was already trending in that direction with the proliferation of Twitter and Facebook and, You can email your member of Congress any time of the day or night. But people really are I think this is a time for people to be able to lean into that and see what their power is in this moment, right? So if it's important to you, if it's an experience that you think lends itself to a broader discussion, you have all the tools to do that. And this is the time to lean in and be active, because it's not a time to be silent. We all have to help each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To wrap up today, if you were to say in 5 words or less something to the Latino community about how they can weather the storm of this pandemic, what would you say?
I can condense it to 4, and I think it is part of the rollout of what we're trying to do at MANA. We're known for being women in the community who serve the community, right, and are advocates in the community. And so what we're asking of our women, because they can't have their community meetings, they can't do their traditional outreach, they can't be out the way they're supposed to, but what we think they can do in this time is be hermana, our organization MANA, we say it's short for hermana, sister. So whether you're a man, a woman, non-binary, that you can be an hermana or an hermano or an hermanekis to the next person. And the way we say we can do that is to lead, serve, educate, and advocate. And so in leading, modeling good behavior, in serving, whether that's helping a neighbor get their groceries or helping someone, a child in your family, do their homework, educate, sharing resources and information, and then advocate, being vocal about the things that you need to make sure that you and your families continue to be safe and healthy.
I love that, because it's not only me, myself, and those close to me, but it's also here's how me taking those steps can really have a positive impact on those around me and the larger community. So I really love that idea of bringing it home, but also having what you do at home have significant impact on what happens abroad. How can people get in touch with you if they wanted to join in what MANA is doing, or just be aware and reach out to you, get some ideas, connect in any way? How can they go about doing that?
They can always visit us at www.hermana.org, hermana.org. And we've got an interface there for you to send us an email, send us a message, and also social media, Facebook and Twitter at MANA National. And then we have chapters and affiliates across the country that you can engage with as well, but we're happy to point you in that direction.
That's wonderful. And thank you so much, Amy, for being with us. And I really do hope that all of you watching got some great gems and information out of this, because I know I certainly did. I love just the reminder that, again, we are our brother's keeper. And what happens to us happens to them, and we have to be careful and be mindful about how we regard the lesser among us, right? Because their needs are truly have direct impact on the needs that we have. Thank you again for watching, and you will definitely catch us the next time around. All the links and all the things that Amy referred to will be in this post, so feel free to click on that, and that will take you right to our organization. Until next time, bye.